the editing actually makes Jill and Amber look less crazy. The reality is they were 10 times more insane than what you see on TV. The things they were saying and the actions they were doing were just beyond um, childish. They were so unimaginable that at points I looked at the camera and I would say, you really cannot allow this to continue. And they were silent.
I am joined by Javier Colon, who is part of the Netflix series Outlast. How are you doing today, Javier?
I'm good. I'm really good. Easter's been great.
I imagine that your current circumstances are a little more comfortable than the Alaskan wilderness.
Yeah, yeah. And I just finished up a year of travel, so it's good to just not move and be in one place.
Yes, from what I understand, you bicycled nearly 20,000 miles to the tip of South America. Was that the Pan America route? What was that?
I did do a lot of the Pan American Highway, but then I deviated and did some trails in the mountains and some wine country in Argentina.
Oh, nice, nice. So, from what I understand, you kind of, I don't know, are you on a sort of semi-retirement? And let me explain. You work X amount a year and then you vacation, travel, or do something else with the rest of it.
That's Yeah, that's a good explanation. Basically, I think my life changed in 2010 when I nearly died in a car crash. Uh,
What happened?
I think time for me became more significant when uh, when you almost lose your life. You start to realize, what am I doing with my time? And then I kind of promised myself that I wasn't going to be stuck in an office. And yeah, I thought waste my life. So whenever I earned a little bit of money, I figured, well, now's the time to go on a vacation. So sometimes I work for 3 months or 6 months, and then I jump on my bicycle. And traveling by bicycle is very inexpensive. Your all your food is basically your fuel, and you have no other expenses when you pitch your tent in the woods. So I do that over and over, and I recycle, rinse, and repeat over and over for 13 years since my crash. And I've gone on some epic journeys.
That's awesome. Are you a reader, Javier?
Uh, I guess a bit.
No. Okay, I just bring it up because what popped into my mind is a series of books by John D. MacDonald
Oh,
called Travis McGee. And the character
okay.
Travis McGee, what he does is he recovers things for people and loads up what he calls his kitty with cash. And then he doesn't do anything until the kitty runs low. Then he goes and finds more work. And as he put it, he's taken his retirement in installments.
Oh, well, that's actually a nice way to put it. I haven't seen. I'm not familiar with that book.
Well, they're old. They're back from the 80s, but I just it reminded me so much of that. You're the first person I've come across who has literally, I think, taken the retirement installment. So it's
Oh,
a it's a dream, I think, for a lot of people, and you get a chance to live it.
yeah. It's also a scary uh, dream for a lot of people because I think the biggest um, fear is the unknown. And so when people don't have a plan and they don't know where they're going to be the next day, that kind of makes them feel uncomfortable. But I've learned to embrace that fear. And I get on my bicycle each day and I have no idea how far I'm going or where I'll end up or where my next meal will be. And that is very unsettling for many, many people.
Well, also, I would imagine be hard for having a family.
Oh, yes, it is. But I have met families on the road. They're they tend to be from specific areas. So I've met a lot of Dutch people who travel with their families, but the Dutch
Mhm.
are born with a bicycle, so it might come more easier to them.
That's true, and I don't remember the term, but in Eastern Europe, there are people who travel. There's an old term used for it, but it's considered a
Oh,
slant, so I'm not going to use that.
well,
I don't remember
I
there's a
think
name for them, though.
In Ireland, they call them travelers. So
Travelers, okay, good
yeah,
name, good name. Alright, so now your travels, and from what I understand, Instagram put you
yeah,
in touch with the producers of Outlast, the Netflix show. Can you tell me what
yeah.
happened?
So I live off the grid full time. I have a small truck camper with solar panels. And I find myself, my only entertainment is pretty much YouTube and Netflix. But I was scrolling through Instagram, and one night I saw this ad, very simple, just a Instagram ad, and it said, "Do you have what it takes to um, survive in Alaska? We're we're putting together a new show, uh, team focused, and if you think you have what it takes, contact us with with a video." And
Mhm.
so I didn't think too much about it, but I figured I have time to give him a short video. I made a 47-second video and I posted that online on the Outlast fan page.
Mhm.
All it says is I walk in front of my camper and I say, "Hello, my name's Javier Colon."
Hey guys, so my name's Javier Colon, and you see that rig in the back there? That's my home. Oh, that's my little beast. I've gone across the United States maybe a dozen times in that. I boondock and live everywhere for the last 5 years in that little vehicle right there. When I'm not in that, I'm cycling around the world. So this is a means to an end, basically. I'm able to work anywhere I go and save up. And then when I'm not living in the US, I'm on two wheels cycling somewhere. So if you're looking for an adventurous spirit and somebody with a lot of mileage, I'm your guy.
And when I'm not on four wheels and I point to my camper, I said I'm on two and I ride my bicycle around the world. So if you're looking for a guy with a lot of experience and many stories to tell, look me up. That's all I said. And I sent it. And then I went to bed. And the next morning I got a phone call from one of the casting people. And she's like, "Hello, I'm looking for Javier." And I thought it was a telemarketer. I thought, "Oh, how did you get this number?" And she goes, "No, no, I'm not selling anything." And then I go, "Well, what do you want?" And she says, "You sent the video." And I go, "The video I sent less than 12 hours ago?" And she goes, "Yeah, we need to talk to you." And so I said, "Okay." And what was supposed to be a 30-minute interview ended up being an hour and a half as I told her so much. I told her how I got to where I am, a lot of stories, and she loved me. And she says, We really need to talk to you more." And then that turned into 4 months of interviews and on the show.
Okay, that's interesting, and I was wondering about that because I didn't imagine they said, "Okay, boom, you're selected. Report here next Monday." How did that go down in terms of they said, "Yes, you're officially here." Did they send you a contract you signed, and then was the date immediate or in the future?
No, so it was many interviews with many different people. I think the last interview was with Grant, the producer,
Mhm,
and he caught me while I was on a bike trip, actually, because I figured if I was going to go on the show, I needed to be strong.
mhm.
So I set off to do a 2,500-mile bike trip. That's a short one for me. So I rode from San Francisco up to the border of Canada and back down to San Francisco. And he caught me on the way in the woods. And when he was chatting to me, he's like, "Are you on your bike right now?" And I said, "Well, yeah, the bike's behind me. I was sitting outside of a cafe using their Wi-Fi." And he
Uh-huh.
said, "So what are you doing?" I go, "Oh, I was camping. I had to get up at 5 in the morning and I had to ride 3 hours to get to this cafe because I was in the deep woods." And he's like, "I think you're on the show." He goes, I think you're on the show." And he says, if everything checks up and you get a medical evaluation and all that's good, we look forward to seeing you in Alaska. And I was like, "Okay, great." So I actually went from there. I went to Portland. I met up with a friend of a friend who let me stay at his place. and they dropped me off at a hospital where production set up some doctor to give me a physical. The doctor gave me a physical and sent everything to them while I was on the road. And of course, everything was good. And then I think they just sent me a list of what I could take, and they didn't give me a contract yet. I think that was what I got in Alaska. But I basically ticket to Alaska, and I was thinking, this is so vague. I don't know very much. I thought I would have more details, like legal documents, and I figured there'd be more bureaucratic stuff, and there wasn't. It was basically get to Alaska. So I flew to Alaska, and then that's when I really started to realize that this was like a real show. When I saw the people and then crew members walking around.
I'm wondering, and this is my speculating, this is the first season of doing it. Maybe there was less bureaucracy because they were kind of figuring it out as they went.
No, the whole crew, Grant has created Alone. He's the creator of Alone. So
Right.
these guys have been on many different shows, the camera guys and the staff. I think they told me that it's best if the less I know, because they don't want to taint anything. So we shouldn't be talking to each other. We should be separated all the time. They said, do not talk to anybody else. You want to be fresh and true on the camera. So when you meet, it's actually your first meeting. And that was true for me. I didn't know anybody until we got dropped there. And even on the show, as the weeks went by, I came up with nicknames for the people across the river because I didn't know their names. I called Seth the Viking, the hairy Viking. I didn't know his name.
He looked like it.
Yeah. And I knew Nick was the wrestler, so he was just the wrestler to me. But they keep it vague for a reason.
Okay, no, that definitely works. Now, back to it though. How much advance did you have? And I'm asking for a reason because you're obviously very strategic. It didn't work out the way you wanted, but you're very strategic. Did they say, okay, you're going to report in a month, in 2 months, in 2 weeks? How long did you have before you actually were to fly up there?
1 month to Alaska. Yeah.
And what did you do during that month to prepare yourself?
So because I had so many interviews, and I guess I didn't realize, but you were on the right line there of my strategy. I did my trip in August before I even knew I was going to be on the show, the bicycle trip. And I did that because I felt from the interviews that I was a shoo-in for the competition. And I thought, I'm not going to have enough time if they tell me you're in to go do a trip. I'm going to have to prepare my things. So I figured August I'm taking the 1 month. I'll do this bicycle trip and get in shape. And then September, I'll pack up all my things and then tell my clients that I have to leave and then go put all my things in storage. So I was already planning. And then when they told me in September that you got to be out here at the end of September to start filming, I thought, okay, I'm ready. So I was pretty organized and ready. And I was getting in that mindset in August before I was even on the show officially.
Okay, and I think in other interviews, you've referred yourself as a polar bear before you went up. So were you over consuming calories, etc.? And can you describe what you did to build up your body fat, get prepared, or whatever you were doing ahead?
So I do this. I've been doing this for a long time, but I go on a roller coaster. When I'm not on a trip, I get very big. I just start to stack on the weight. And then when I get on a trip, I can lose 40, 50 pounds in 3 months on a bicycle trip. But these are thousands of miles. So these are big, long trips. And I sometimes cook my own food out in the wilderness. But for this show, I didn't want to get all fat because the bicycle trip also got me strong. But I basically eat a lot of meat, a lot of bread. I pound bread. And at that time I was working at I actually worked at a bakery because during COVID, I wanted to learn more baking skills. And I was like everybody else trying to bake your own bread, but I sucked at it. So I found a bakery in San Francisco and I said, hey, I'd like to work here 2 days a week And they said, sure, we could use you. So I worked at a bakery, and one of the benefits was I got a massive amount of free bread and bagels. So I was pounding bagels and bread. Uh, I was probably consuming easily 4,000 calories a day. I put on 30 pounds in a month and a half. And it sounds like a lot, but I can do that pretty quickly.
Mhm.
So I got really big, and then went out to the show, and we were in a hotel, and then the menu was open. So I was ordering 2 meals at each time. I was like, give me the two orders of the catfish, and then give me the steak as well. And I was just pounding it because I knew from experience. I was in Alaska before in 2011 how cold it can get. And I thought the one thing that's going to make this a lot easier is just being very fat, as fat as possible, uh, but still healthy underneath,
Sure.
still physically strong. And that was my plan. It's just something I've done. It's second nature to me. Uh, I do this before every trip.
Okay, well, and I, I'm completely out of shape now, but I've done marathons and stuff, and a lot of runners believe in carb loading, so it's not completely different than I think what you're doing, but you're doing
Yes.
it on a bigger scale, obviously, for extended time. And that was another question I had. Yeah, you do long-term bicycle trips and you do some camping. Where did you gain so much very specific survival knowledge?
Yeah. So a lot of this comes from failing.
Mm,
I started cycle touring in 2006. And one of my first trips was I cycled all of Iceland on a bicycle. And
mm,
on that trip, I didn't bring enough food. I didn't bring enough water. Um, and I didn't know much at all about cycle touring. So I started having to ask local people. And in many instances, I was in trouble. I ran out of food and water. So I would see a farmhouse in the distance, and I'd have to ride to that farmhouse, knock on the door, and ask for help. And then I realized that by asking for help from locals, they started giving me all these survival tips. So some people would say, well, when you're in this area, you could easily find water here. You could always look for this plant. This actually comes very easily from local people. And so the countries I've been in, they always gave me this information. And sometimes people would say, oh, you're going into a desert. It's very difficult to find anything out there, but look for this plant. And that's how I started to learn is from the exotic places I've been, people would give me advice. And then I learned soon after to ask for it and to ask for specific things. And sometimes those specific things, they change in every uh, location. But the people were kind of surprised that to ask for this. Well, I almost starved to death in another place. So I don't want to be in that situation here in this country. And they gave me that information. Also, I love to eat. I'm the hungry guy on a bicycle. So I often ask local people to cook with them or my host. A lot of people see me on the road and they'll invite me into their house to stay there the night. Sometimes we don't even speak the same language, but I'll cook with the wife or cook with the men if they're making a meat outside. And then I'll come inside and then what the women are cooking, they typically cook separately. And through cooking and identifying plants, what is this? What is that? They they would often tell me, well, this is good for this. And this, if you're also hurting, you could take it for this pain or for constipation. And I learned through doing all my skills through that. I didn't actually grab survival books or watch YouTube survival programs. I went out and learned by doing. So, and
okay,
that's
well, I
16
mean,
years of this.
oh, nice. I was going to point out then that's a misnomer. Supposedly the show is 16 lone wolves. I would argue you're anything but a lone wolf. You're a team player because
Oh,
you work with other people, you learn skills, you don't just ask for information, you're working with people when they're cooking. Those are all team minded traits. So maybe you're slightly mislabeled. Just
well,
something to
that's a
consider.
good perspective because I do travel alone. A lot of people have said nomad, called me a nomad. One
Mhm.
person called me a bohemian nomad. I kind of like that one. But yeah, 20 years of traveling alone around the world. I do. Uh, well, my specialty in studying at the university was intercultural management. And
Mhm.
so I really did like to work with groups and people. But I think my lifestyle and travels have gave me the label as the lone wolf.
Yeah, and I could see that, but you were perfectly wired for short-term team building, especially because you would go
Mm,
into one town, one place, whatever, establish your relationship very rapidly, and then you would leave to the next relationship. And that
yeah.
actually is almost perfect training for the scenario I see the producers imagining, although it didn't quite turn out that way.
Yeah.
So, on that note, we've immediately got to get to the controversy and the Demon Squad. And I will say, this isn't the type of show I normally watch. I was watching it with my wife, and I actually found it disturbing. I didn't expect it to turn into the Stanford prison experiment in the
Exactly.
wild.
Exactly. I think I was the only one out there who knew that experiment, and I stated it. I
Oh,
stated it the
okay.
first week.
All right. I don't know that you caught that. I don't think they filmed you saying it, but
No,
it did come to mind. I know Lord of Flies, you've said that a lot as well, and that came on. But it was very interesting. Now, you had to do an alliance with the Alpha team that you nicknamed the Demon Squad early on. Did you do this simply because you're on the same side of the river and it was more difficult to get with the other teams across the river?
yeah, there's been a lot of reference to the alliance, but we only did that, I guess, um, to to delay the inevitable. I
Mhm,
told
mhm,
Brian that we got to keep our friends close, but our enemies closer. And it's obvious that from the first meeting of the Demon Squad, they were going to rob us. I told Brian that they're going to rob us. And he said, I think you're exaggerating. And I think you're paranoid. And I said, no, I could see in their eyes. They're desperate. It's only been a week and desperate people do desperate things. And I said, let's just speak friendly, but we don't really need them. And we didn't really need them. What you
mhm.
don't see in the show is our first meeting when they said, if you're going to the crab pot island, steal all the pots. And me and Brian
Really?
looked at each other and we're like, I I don't really need more than one pot. But we just nodded our heads and they said, yeah, let's have an alliance. So if you make it to the island first, steal all the pots so the other teams don't have anything. And then we just said, oh, well, we'll see. We'll see. And then they said, if we make it to the island first, we'll steal all the pots so that we have we can help each other out like an alliance. And so me and Brian were like, oh, okay, okay. As soon as we left from them, I told Brian, why the hell would we steal the other pot? I said, we don't need to take anything from anybody. We only need one pot. This is a competition about outlasting. We're not going to be stealing from each other. And Brian's like, I totally agree. We don't need to take any more pots than what we need, one. And so as we're walking is when I'm telling Brian all these thoughts that I had about them and that behavior. And Brian was thinking, oh, you're making a lot of assumptions. And I said, Brian, I know from experience this is going to happen. If they can't take this, it has only been almost a week, and they're acting like that. They're getting desperate already. I go, this is fun for me. We're having fun. Me and Brian were still having fun. I go,
Mhm.
but they're talking about desperate measures. Um, you don't bring up stealing unless you're in a desperate situation. And so after our failure, we built the raft and Brian tried to go out and the tide brought him back. We actually saw the land bridge because the tide completely went out and the
Mm.
land bridge was right in front of us. And I said, oh my God, let's just run over there. And production says, no, we're done filming for today. And also it's getting dark. You guys have to hike back two
Mm.
miles. So for safety, you have to go back to your camp. And so we had to be in our camp by nightfall. That was a rule, actually. And for the safety of the park rangers also told us that the bear activity at that time, we all had to go back to the park at night. So as we're hiking back, we passed Alpha Camp, and Justin's still building his boat. And they asked me how we did, and we failed. And then me and Brian told them, well, would you imagine it? There's a land bridge there. You don't even need the boat. We told them that there was a land bridge. But in the series, it shows as if Jill and Amber were creatively figuring it out without realizing. Obviously, we were in front of the island and the tide went out. So we found the land bridge. So we gave them that piece of information. And I told them, asked them politely, if you're there, do you mind picking up our crab pot? I was hoping the exchange of information would be good.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, yeah, sure. So the girls got the crab pots. I told them to go early because we didn't have a watch.
Mm-hmm.
So we knew that the sun set about 5:30.
Mm-hmm.
And so that means that 5:30 was the low tide. And I said, girls, you're going to have to get up at 5:30. That'll be the lowest tide. They actually crossed maybe 7:30 or 8. And that's why they got wet coming back, because they spent so long looking for the pots. But then Justin finished his raft, and they decided on their own to dump the crab pots. And that's why they gave us the crab. And they thought they bought us. But really, Brian and I, we were never on board with this alliance with the ideas that they had. They weren't kosher for us.
Wow. This brings up a whole bunch of questions, and I hope you can indulge me. But
yeah,
you mentioned, okay, the production stopped you from going to the island. That had to be frustrating.
Yeah.
But I don't know what the rules are on what you're allowed to talk about, but I'm very interested in the mechanics of the production. They obviously make it appear that you're out there all by yourself. There's nobody there, but there has to be somebody walking around with a camera with you at all times, or you're not going to appear on TV. So I don't know. Are you limited on what you can say about how things worked while you were out there?
Well, not so much in to answer your question. No, I can answer your question that we did have a cameraman and a sound guy, and we had the national park ranger was there. So for security purposes and for our safety, they told us that we couldn't be out at night. So that was a rule. And because of the bear activity, there was so much bear activity, it was definitely a rule to be in camp at night, not to go out, because you wouldn't want to surprise a bear in the forest at night and all that stuff. So, yeah, we did have a cameraman with us, following us, and one park guy to make sure we didn't do anything illegal, because it is a national park.
Right. And actually, that's a question I've got to get in, because my wife wanted to know. She's very concerned about this. She goes, okay, who cleaned up after them? Did they clean up after themselves? Did they pick everything? No, she was very concerned about that. So if you could answer that, who cleaned up after you, or was it cleaned up?
So we did have to gather all our things, and then production would clean up after us. I mean, after we left.
Sure.
But one thing is, it was a national park. We did have to poop in Home Depot 5-gallon buckets. So we had a plastic bag in that bucket, and we pooed in that bucket. So there was no feces going on into the water sources over there.
Right.
That was cleaned out by the National Forest. We would put in a bag, and then they'd put it on a boat, and they'd take care of it. But pretty much, in a way, we were cleaning up the beach, because anything we found on the beach we could use. So we were finding things and taking them back to camp. And then we were told after we left that they would be cleaned up by production. And with the forest ranger, he was a pretty nice guy. He was going to make sure all that was done. He was even there for my fire. So he was making sure that the fire was controlled and that everything was okay. And it burned out soon after the big blaze, because everything's so wet over there. It couldn't burn everything to dust.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, on the note of, I think you called it a honey bucket or a honey pot, the Home Depot depository. Am I correct? And when you're watching the show back, did one of your quote opponents use the lid of the honey pot as part of their paddle?
Oh, um, no, that was a lid they found on the beach
Oh, okay.
because that was Delta's paddle, and when
Mhm.
Delta came over, they left us their raft when they shot the flare. So that was I had that, and it was a plastic lid of a 5-gallon bucket they found on the beach.
Okay. Well, my wife pointed that out, and I was like, "Oh, that could be," and that's actually kind of clever, I guess, even though it'd be a stinky time inside of the tent if they were using that. Okay, so further on the production, and this is the part that is weird to me. Did you talk to the camera person at all, or was communication forbidden? Same thing with the ranger.
It it was very we didn't really have a conversation. The only thing is they would say, "Can you wait up?" Because we hiked and we just went,
Mhm.
and so the cameraman is really athletic and he's carrying that huge thing around. He would sometimes fall in the water or fall on the ground, and he'd just go, "Hey, just can you wait for me?" That's it. So our conversation was very minimal, and really after maybe 4 or 5 days, we didn't even realize they were there. We just kind of ignored them. They were
Mm.
just kind of like a puppy in the distance following you all over the house.
So they were full size cameras, though, not GoPros that were
Oh,
hanging.
we a mix of both. Well, there was like a GoPro that they would put inside the our tents at
Mhm.
night, or sometimes in tight shots where they couldn't fit in, they'd put it in the background. They put one on a tree. There was a couple bear cams hanging on different trees, and then we also had a little handy cam that we could film ourselves when we were
I was
alone
wondering about that.
at night. Uh, so basically, the cameramen were there from like sunrise to sunset, and that was it.
Now, I don't remember what they're called, but there's always the part where, the camera breaks out, you're sitting there and you're talking directly to the camera, giving your thoughts about whatever's
Oh yeah,
happening.
testimonials.
Testimonials.
Yeah.
How does that work? And I ask because I try to envision myself in this situation, and I'm thinking, okay, boom, I'm busy picking muscles, doing whatever, trying to
Yeah.
run around. Is this a thing of, okay, Javier, got to do your testimonial now. Go ahead and get over here, pack it up. We're going to get on the camera. How does that work?
That exactly as you said it. It sometimes pissed me off. So, yeah, it would take me away from doing something. So if I was working on something, uh, they would say, "Hey, can you do a testimony real quick?" And I'd go, "I'm doing something. Leave me alone." And they'd go, "Please, just we gotta get this because you just did it." It's like if we just did something, or
Mm.
like our first encounter with the Alpha team, they wanted our impressions. So when we got back, they're like, "Well, it's still fresh in your head. What are your impressions of Alpha team?" And then I'd just say talk in the camera. But yes, it did get in the way. Sometimes it would bother me, but we had to do it. And it was sometimes they would say it's your choice if you want to do it, but uh, if the you got to imagine the viewers don't know what happened. So if you explain what's occurring, then you're kind of thinking out loud. That was the way they explained it to us. So if nobody knows what you're thinking, no one's going to really know your thought process, and we're not going to be able to tell your story. But if you help us and you tell us what you're thinking out loud, then we can tell a better story. So that when that made more sense, and it kind of made us realize, well, this isn't really bothering us. We're just helping the viewers understand what's going on in our thought process. And then it became kind of, we're helping you, basically. We were helping you.
Okay, no, no, it makes total sense. I've always wondered that though. How long of a time would you spend being filmed for a testimonial on average?
Oh, I think maybe 30 minutes.
30?
Yeah,
Okay.
about 30 minutes. That's it.
Okay, now there's a lot of accusations about reality TV, and I am going somewhere with this, believe it or not. But did the producers at all shape what you were saying by the
No,
questions they were asking?
no, no. They they would ask very open, blank things. Uh, they didn't hint or make suggestions or anything. It was pretty much uh, only trying to understand what I was trying to explain. So if I said something and they didn't understand it, they would say, "What did you mean? What do you mean by that?" So it's not shaping it the storyline. I think everything was real raw and in many instances on the part of other teams, not really well thought through. So uh, we were just really reacting and trying to calm our emotions and explain in camera what just occurred. Um, I do think that I have never watched reality TV. The only reality TV I've watched is Real World Road Rules on MTV back in the 90s. So
Okay.
I don't have a model in my head of how people talk. But I think some of those people, in fact, many of those people on the show, my castmates, they've watched a lot of reality shows. So in their heads, I think they have this idea of how they're supposed to act or talk to the camera. And so when you could see when people are talking to the camera, sometimes it looks a bit odd, at least to me. And I think it's because they think that's how they're supposed to be talking from the things they've seen. So I think that's what it is.
Okay, you had really good presence on it. I mean, you're very popular and have great charisma. Did they at least encourage you or coach you at all to say, no, don't look at me, look at the lens?
Oh,
Was there any mechanical information, just like how to present while you're speaking to the camera?
oh, no, no. In fact, they did capture me when I was yelling at Jill. I pointed at the camera. They put one scene in, but I had a whole monologue that they didn't use. I talked about the state of our country and the division. And Jill sat there listening to all of it. And I said, this is why we're divided. And I think they didn't use that for obvious reasons. It might have divided people. But I did look at the camera and point, and I was saying, everyone can see, the whole world's going to judge you for your actions. Are you crazy? And obviously, she didn't listen to any of that. I was trying to calm her. I was begging for her to realize that millions of people would see her. So yeah, they didn't coach us or anything, or really, it was all natural.
Wow. Yeah, that whole encounter was insane. But that does lead to the next thing because I wanted to ask about producers. I wanted all this information so I could get very specific. Jill and Amber apparently in Instagram posts or
Yeah.
interviews, etc., are claiming that there was hours and hours, hundreds of hours of footage, and that the footage was cherry picked to give a bad edit and turn them into villains. So there's two questions, and this is the most important one. You also had hundreds of hours of footage
Yeah.
of you, and I imagine that they didn't get every detail, but do you think they represented you fairly in what actually happened?
Um, I do. Uh, I guess I did want to see more of my survival skills on there, but in comparison to everybody else, they didn't show many of any camp's side skills. So in that regard, I don't feel like we're all losing something there. They omitted that because the drama was so big. But I've said this before, the editing actually makes Jill and Amber look less crazy. The reality is they were 10 times more insane than what you see on TV. The things they were saying and the actions they were doing were just beyond childish. They were so unimaginable that at points I looked at the camera and I would say, you really cannot allow this to continue. And they were silent. The camera they were quiet and just holding the cameras. And I would look and say, guys, this is really a problem. That this can't. And Jill and Amber over there saying they were threatening me in such a way. I could not. I thought even in a movie this would be hard to do. There's this at Sin City. Before they actually robbed me and went up to my campsite, what you don't see is they approached me as I was making my boat, my raft on the water. And they started to threaten me then. And so they came up like a scene from, it was like some mobsters. They came up and they're like, you have two choices to either go across the river and join them now, or we destroy your camp and take all your shit. And I'm making my raft and I'm looking at these two little ladies and I'm thinking, no, you're not going to do that. And they go, oh, yes, we will. And I'm just thinking, this is a joke. This is just intimidation. I never thought that they'd actually try to do it. And so I finished my raft and I drag, and as I'm dragging my raft out and I'm getting ready to pull in Joel, I keep looking behind me and I see them go for it. And that's when I drop my stuff and run. But there's a long period of time of them making threats to me and hanging out on the beach and taunting me and saying really ridiculous things like, you're going to get it. You're going to get it. And I'm just thinking, Warriors. Remember the movie Warriors?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a scene where they're clinking the bottles with his fingers. And he goes, Warriors, come out and play. Yay. I was imagining that. And I'm thinking, these bullies over here are taunting me like a Warriors scene. It became that vicious. And so when the scene did happen and I'm in my campsite, the recordings would show just the craziness that they were saying and threatening me. And at one point, Jill and Amber were there on both sides of my cabin, both sides. And so they were like trying to get something. So they would come from the right side and I'd kind of deflect Amber, and then Jill would come from the left. You don't see that. So
actually, no, they did have some of that in there. They did, because I will confess that I don't encourage violence. I really am a good person, but my wife and I wanted you to throw them in the river.
And I knew that my actions would be judged by millions. I knew that. And also, to some regard, some people brought this up on Reddit. If two men were to rob one woman in the woods, it would be horrific. It would be absolutely horrific. But if two women rob a man in the woods, some people are coming to rationalize with all kinds of excuses to make sense of it, that it's perfectly fine. They were in a desperate situation. But you know what? We make choices, and we're supposed to be outlasting and surviving in the woods. And Brian and I were actually quite cozy and comfortable. You notice many of the other cast members were saying that this was the most difficult thing in their life, that they were suffering and starving. And Brian and I, we were not starving. We were not suffering. Sure, some things, it was cold, it was wet, but this was a very enjoyable survival experience. It was the people dynamic that started to make things really unpleasant, unnecessarily. So the editing made Amber and Jill look better than they were. Amber and Jill are terrible people. And the things they're doing right now online and the lies that they're spreading just to try and rationalize their insane behavior, it doesn't make any sense. And people can see straight through it. All of the hours, they created that story. That's who they truly are. But they're refusing to see who they are. They're just trying to escape responsibility.
Well, two notes on that, because first thing that came to my head was, okay, let's say that what they're claiming is true, that it is a bad edit. Maybe it could be argued that, bad edit or not, you provided the footage that they could use for a bad edit. So if you never did these actions or anything bad, then it would be impossible to get such an edit, because they just wouldn't have any material with which they could cobble. And it sounds like they did. also, I think you said in an interview that you were a Boy Scout, and that's
Oh
why you
yeah.
said yes sir, yes ma'am, all of that. As a Boy Scout, I'm not trying to imply it as bad, but I thought you might be a little old fashioned. I consider myself a little bit old fashioned that, I grew up, you will never hit a lady. These are things that I was taught, etc. Do you feel that Jill and Amber were using the fact that they are women and paralyzing you from really being able to shove them aside or do whatever because you're having to constrain yourselves out of civility, and they were taking full advantage of that?
Well, I would go a step further in not only civility, they were using the law to their advantage. There was one point where I grabbed an inner tube that Jill had stolen from my cabin, and she wrapped it around her. I actually grabbed the inner tube to pull it, but it was around under her arm.
Mhm.
So it actually pulled her, and she screamed and said, "He's assaulting me." And I let go of the inner tube, and I realized not only do you not hit a woman out of civility and ethical reasons, but they're going to try and get me off the show for touching them. So
Mm.
I'm like, she's screaming, "There's no law." And I'm on the side, which you didn't see, saying, "Oh, but if I touch you, you're going to scream, 'Arrest him,'" because they did. They wanted me to get arrested. They said I assaulted them. And when I got down to the raft, Amber says, "Get your hands off me, dude." I didn't even touch her at that moment. She was just trying to make it appear as if I was assaulting her. It gave me images of these Karen videos that you see of people saying, "Oh my God, the police," and they're screaming on the phone and they're saying,
Mhm.
"Oh, he's hurting me. He's hurting me." And the guy's like, "Ma'am, I'm not doing anything." And he's like feet away from her. So that they were using the law to their advantage. And in one instance, you know, I'm getting strong armed robbed by a woman in the woods. And if we were in reality, I could imagine that Jill would be on the phone calling the police saying, "Officers, can you come here immediately? Because this man won't allow me to rob him."
Mhm.
I can't understand why he won't allow me to rob him. Can you please send backup? That's what sense it made for me.
See, this frustrated me though watching it because I thought similar things that obviously you can't strike, push, whatever. And earlier I said we wished you would. That doesn't mean that we're
Yeah.
saying you should, but feelings are feelings. And I'm sure that you had dark feelings toward them at the time. But that seems selective in enforcement, that the production would say it's fine. They can steal whatever they want. They can put people at risk of actual physical harm. It is a legitimate physical harm in the middle of the night to be freezing and not able to sleep. You can get hypothermia.
Yeah.
But at the same time, obviously, they would step in and not allow you to touch or do this or do that. Is it unfair of me to be a little bit critical and say that there may have been a double standard taking place for the sake of drama?
Um, I think I was the victim here. Um,
Mm,
I think through the experience and it being the first show, I think it was necessary for the world to see. I
okay.
think it was an experiment. This was a social experiment. And much like the Stanford prison experiment, we need to be confronted with the ugliness of humanity. We need to see what people can do. And then if we recognize, and as the world is recognizing now, that was wrong, they can see that, then it gives us hope. It gives us hope because we see that we shouldn't be doing this. We shouldn't be treating people like this. If we were at a point where the entire world was supporting Jill, Justin, and Amber, then we got problems because we would have reached a vicious time period where the win forsakes any wrongdoing. So we're not at that point. And so when I see the show, it is disturbing to watch myself get robbed. But when I see the comments and the fans and the defense of me against those actions, I feel that this was a good experiment. and I'm happy of the production that they created because it in as little um, influence and as possible, the production was able to allow a natural thing occur without any guidance at all, where they gave us no rules. It was so vague. They just let us do our thing. And that's the beauty of the experiment that people got to realize is Jill and Amber naturally did this totally. And I, knowing, I guess, right from wrong and being a Boy Scout, a lifetime of experience, I knew this isn't real life. I could separate that. This isn't real life. I don't need to hurt these people. And I decided not to do that because that's the right thing, isn't it? And I don't think I was wrong in making that decision. Sure, I lost my ability to potentially or win the money, but some people have written that I won more than the money in my action, and that makes me feel better. It makes me sleep good at night, and it makes me know that I have more friends than enemies out there.
Yeah, and you should be proud. I think you conducted yourself well. By the way, and so did Brian. I think he left the show partly because of his own morality being offended to such a degree that it was no longer worth it, along with others.
Yeah.
Honestly, at the end, and this is just my useless opinion, but I feel like Seth was probably the one out of everybody, who made it all the way through, who kind of came out clean in terms of was very supportive of teammates. I didn't hear anything bad about him. He seemed to be a straight up supportive guy, no real conflicts, kind of low key, less drama. Somebody I could almost see you hanging out with and camping with in the future. I'm not sure. But that brings me to the third part of the Demon Squad. And Justin, you seem to feel more sympathy toward him. Do you see him as a Patty Hearst character or what?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I've been asked in another interview, had Justin been on our team, do you think he would have acted the same way? And I don't think he would have, because part of our team dynamic was we would never even think or talk about things like that. So not talking about those types of things wouldn't have been in Justin's mind. And had he brought it up, we would have shot it down immediately. So I think Justin would have been played a more cleaner game with Bravo, and potentially with other teams as well. I do believe that Jill did admit that she brought up the theft from another team. That was her idea. However, I've seen that she suggested that I never intended for sleeping bags to be stolen. I was just thinking a knife or an axe would be stolen, not their sleeping bags. But then she completely flip-flopped on that and said, hell yeah, I wanted to get everything stolen. Playing dirty is fine. So you don't know what, any day of the week she can change her mind and change her story. But it was her idea. And that I agreed. She's never swayed from that. But I've chatted with Justin, and I've chatted with Justin after the show, and he seems like a guy I'd have a beer with. Would I, go camping with him again? I don't know, but I definitely have a beer with him and chat. But Joe and Amber, I don't care to meet them ever again. I have no intention of trying to have a conversation with them. It's not the type of person that has any qualities that I care to waste my time with. But Justin, I did have some sympathy for.
Okay. Yeah, and I felt that. And Jill and Amber, and I don't like to judge people by their past, obviously, but sometimes it's foreshadowing of the future.
Yeah.
And Jill's a private detective. Amber,
I'm not sure that's true.
Well, I don't know,
sure.
but even if she is, and even if Amber Amber said she was a felon, said that she was a former addict, the behavior displayed is something that you will see in people who live on the dark side, if you will,
Yeah.
who are manipulating their way to get product, to get information, to get things. And I wholeheartedly agree with you that I'm thinking a show like this doesn't change people, it exposes people's cores.
Yeah. Absolutely.
To close out, though, what is the question that you wish somebody would ask you and they don't?
Oh, um, uh, well, a lot of people focus on this, but did I have fun? Did I
Did
have
you?
fun? Yeah, I did have fun. Uh, Everyone focuses on the drama, but every day, every morning, I woke up and the Alaskan sky was amazing. I would have a deep, fresh breath. Um, I felt, you know, I felt like a big hippie out there. Uh, yeah, I mean, apart from hugging trees, I was kissing mussels, dancing in the rainforest, and it was all fun. It was amazing, and Alaska didn't defeat me. Jill and Amber tried. I destroyed my own camp, packed up, and I wanted to continue. Unfortunately, Charlie didn't let me continue, but Alaska didn't defeat me. I had an amazing time, and I want to thank Netflix for the opportunity. It was a really beautiful experience.
Would you do it again?
Absolutely. In fact, I would love to come back and maybe be the rule keeper for the second series and tell people you can't do that. No, you are not allowed to do that.
Oh, well, Javier, thank you so much. People can find you on Instagram, Hungry Man with a Bicycle,
Hungry guy on a bicycle.
Hungry Guy on a Bicycle.
And that's Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, the same name.
Awesome. And I'll definitely link below. And folks, go subscribe to his YouTube. I hope you're going to be putting more videos up. You travel all the time. There should be a lot of videos in there.
Yeah, there's thousands right now, but on Instagram. But Brian and I are teaming up, and we're actually going to be doing a bike trip very soon in August.
Fantastic. I look forward to that. And maybe both of you can come back and check in.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.